Hi, I'm the Moorlander and this is Moorlander EDC. Now, a gauntlet has been thrown down. A gauntlet has been slapped across my face. And that is because a few weeks ago about a month ago now, I made some content on the Civivi KI-VIVI, which is a brilliant little small flipper, come on, think of words, Moorlander, knife, UK legal knife, and how much, I quite liked it. And that was where the gauntlet was thrown. And I'm naming names, that's right, Matt Bailey. You said the baby banter was better, so I'm calling you out. Actually, I kind of agree. Yeah, it's a great little knife. Oh, so there you go. There's the review over. Moorlander agrees. Yeah, it's probably a slightly better knife. The people at Prepper Shop got in touch and asked if I'd like to make some more content, and of course I said yes because I knew that they were holding the baby banter. Now, Prepper Shop here in the UK is one of, if not the best source to prepare. I can't stop flicking this to prepare for those Shinola hits the fan moments, or whether you're wanting to prepare for the zombie apocalypse, whether you're wanting to prepare for just a simple nice day out. They've got everything that you need, plus stuff that you didn't realise you needed until you went through their website. So I want to say a massive thank you to Prepper Store UK for sending me this knife. Full disclosure though, the conversation that I always have with anyone that sends something to me is that it is 100% my opinion that is given today. There's no sort of bias or anything like that, other than the fact that I'm a pretty big fan of Civivi knives at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll turn the camera around, we'll take a closer look at the Civivi baby banter. While I'm doing that, if you do enjoy this content at any point, then please feel free to hit the like, subscribe and share. Oh, it didn't work! Let's take a close look at the baby banter. Well, I think that's sod's law. Just as I've turned the camera on, the wind's picked up a little bit, so if you do hear some wind noise in the background, I do apologise for that in advance. Okay, so as we usually do, we'll go through some measurements, some materials, and then we'll look at some of the features on here. So when this is open in millimeters, you're looking at 135 millimeters. That's from the end of the scales here all the way up to the tip of the knife. When it's closed, it comes in just at 80 millimeters. So as far as knives are concerned, it's actually, I'd say this is a medium to small sized knife. I wasn't going to bring this in till the end, but I thought I might as well compare it. So here you have the Civivi Elementum, which from last year, this really is one of my most favourite knives that I've ever used and kind of reviewed, made some content on. But I'd say that the Elementum is probably a medium-sized knife, where the baby banter, which is a bit of a clue in the name there really, is a medium to small-sized knife, coming in at just 80 millimeters when it's closed. When we look at the actual blade, or the metal end, there you go, there's a technical term for the day. But the blade, sorry, yeah, dad jokes. Okay, so the blade itself comes in at 59 millimeters. When we're talking about blade length here in the UK, as I always try to educate people on, it's not about the actual blade length itself. The blade length goes all the way here through the grind, from the grind point into the ricasso. The actual cutting edge on this, which is the most important here in the UK, is 50 millimeters. Now at this point you might be hoping that this will make this a completely UK knife law safe knife. However, because it's a locking knife, you can't carry this in public. Doesn't mean that it's not legal to own. You can certainly own this. You just can't carry this with you without a good reason. You can't carry this with you in a public place. So I always have to make sure that I say that part, mainly because with the issues that we have with some knives here in the UK, it's important just to stress that bit. So back to the actual metal end again. As far as the height and the thickness of the blade, it comes in at 25 millimeters in height, which really comes down to the belly here up to the spine. And the thickness, I actually quite like the thickness of this. It's not too thick, it's not too thin. They could have potentially gone thinner with it, so it comes in at 2.5 millimeters. They could have potentially gone thinner with it, which I think would have took a little bit away from just the feeling. I mean, it's not necessarily a rugged feeling knife. However, I think if they'd have gone a little bit thinner, then it probably wouldn't have felt as stout as it is. Stout. I think that's probably a good word for this, especially it's the baby banter, but it still has a kind of stouty, chody kind of feel to it, which I think is really nice. So back to measurements. Overall, so we've got the blade, and there are liners in here, and this is G10 material, but it's reasonably light, so it comes in at 55 grams, which again I think that's probably a good weight for a medium to small knife like this. As far as the grind on here, it is a flat grind. It does go reasonably high. However, you'll be able to see there that there is a berm between where you can see that the grind goes all the way up to. But as I say, so it's a completely flat grind. The actual ground edge on it is incredibly well ground. There is a definite uniformity. There's been a few knives that I've looked at recently that the grind on there hasn't really been the best. Generally, what I've found with all of my CIVIV knives that I've had in the past, that there is a lot of attention to detail on these, and you know it definitely shows. Some other things to notice on here. So you have some jimping here at the bottom. So where you have that finger swell, there's some jimping there. There's also some jimping here at the top, to make sure that you just get some extra grip on there if you need to. It's not overly aggressive, and I'd say that the 90-degree edge across the back here as well has had some refinement on that. They've just done some grinding ever so slightly onto that, just to make sure that it has a nicer feel to it. As far as whether or not, I mean, it will shave a nail, but I mean that's with quite a bit of pressure. So it does feel a little bit nicer in the hand, and then you've got some thumb necks here that you can use to be able to open it. It has a very nice, actually, so hopefully you'll be able to see that it has a very nice stone wash, acid etched stone washed. Sorry about that. Finish to the blade itself. Now the blade material on this, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think I've reviewed a Nitro V knife before. I think this is the first one that I had. So the blade stock used on this is Nitro V, and I've had to do some learning myself. I'm not a metallurgist, but I'm trying to learn more about different metals, premium metals, more kind of budget metals. This is a mid-range. From the research that I've done, it's a mid-range metal. The closest similarities that I've seen, so a lot of the similarities that I've seen, it's very similar to AEBL, or another metal that I've probably come across and had more dealings with in the past is the CIVIV, what was it now? It was the 14C28, which is a great steel. It's a very good steel. So it certainly known, I believe it has a little bit more nitrogen in there. I think it's nitrogen that they add to it, which allows it to be a little bit harder, and also allows for extra corrosion resistance. It doesn't make the edge retention as sharp as some of the higher end steels. However, it's still very good. Especially when you look at some of the lower end steels, it's definitely better than those. I felt like I added a negativity to it then. It is a very good steel, and it has great edge retention, and is certainly good against corrosion for a mid-range steel. So moving on from there, hopefully you'll be able to see that we have a liner lock so the liner pushes in, which does mean predominantly that this is for right hand use. I don't know, you really wouldn't be able to swap that even if you could take that out, because it needs to be able to push in that way in order for it to work. It's very smooth. So the pivot joint here, so we have 3 pins. We have the pivot joint, we have 2 barrel spacers here in the inside, nice thick barrel spacers. This barrel spacer here holds the 2 liners in place, and this barrel spacer here, it also holds the liners in place, but also you'll be able to see that on this side, this screw will need to be removed when there's 2 screws on this side, because it does have an ambidextrous clip on there that you can move to either side depending on whether you prefer to have it however you hold it, I guess, for left-handers, even though, you know, the liner lock on there really it's going to be difficult for left-handers to use. But here you have the pivot pin. The pivot pin, similarly with all other CIVIV pivot pins, has that really nice, just small CIVIV logo on there. On the rear side here, you'll be able to see it says WUG? WUB? I didn't think to read that first. Maybe I should have done. Let me just sec. It says... I don't know what it says. Anyway, and then you have the Banter here. So the designer of this knife is the famous Ben Banters Peterson, the original designer of the larger Banter and knife fanatic. And that's where the whole Banter comes in. If you're wondering, if you've never heard of the Banter, this is why this is called the baby Banter, because it's a smaller, more pocketable version of the larger Banter knife, which again, you know, is an incredibly popular knife. On the inside, getting back to the inside, so the scales that we have here, you'll be able to see that there are some recesses within those scales, which hold the metal liners in here, which gives it that extra rigidity, but also allows all of these fixtures along the inside to be able to be screwed into the G10, just to make sure that it really is locked in there. There is also a stopper pin here at the back to make sure that it doesn't over rotate when it comes out. But the action on this, it uses these studs to be able to open, and I have to say I've really annoyed Mrs. Moorlander all week, because this is one of the smoothest openings that I've come across on knives. Now I have to say, so my favourite, again, you know, I mention this a lot, the Elementum, when this opens, it's like butter, and so is this. It really is. I find maybe because with this it's got that flicker on the back, it is just a little easier to open, and I think as well with the additional weight in the blade stock that it's just a little easier to open. I'm not used to thumb studs. This is maybe one of the first knives that I've had with thumb studs, so I'm just getting used to that flick. But when you get it going, and you just, I can see why knife people like this kind of thumb stud open. Yeah, you can just sit and fiddle with that all day. I'm sure there's that's what she said in there somewhere, but I'm just going to move on for now. The G10 is a really nice textured G10, and round the edge there's some nice chamfering to that, so it just gives it a little bit more ergonomics whilst it's in your hand. There is a palm swell here at the bottom, just to make sure that those fingers curl round, and then where you have here, so that pulls out into a finger choil so that you can choke up against the edge, just in case you need to be able to do some finer work on there. Just in case you hadn't noticed, there is a small hole here at the end so that you can put in a lanyard if you choose to. Just checking my notes, I do realise that there's one thing that I missed out, and that's just the geometry on this. So now it says that this is a sheep's foot grind, or sheep's foot geometry. Now it might be sheep's foot. It might. I mean, it's so close to being spear point. I think if this woke up one day and said, "Do you know what? I'm going to identify as a spear point today," it probably could get away with that. It's very symmetrical, but it's just slightly off that center line for a sheep's foot on there. Did also mention that we also have we also have ball bearings in here, which is one of the main reasons that this action is so super smooth. You can see, actually, when you open it about halfway, you might not be able to see it here on camera, but you can see in there, and you can see the bearings. Now, as I mentioned, the main reason that I got onto this mainly was due to, shout out to Matt Bailey, was because of the KI-VIVI. Now, hopefully you'll be able to see, I mean, if you look at them in length, the KI-VIVI is probably 2/3 of the size. If I put them up to here, where you have the pivots in line, you really can see how short the KI-VIVI cutting edge is. Again, holding them next to each other there, the KI-VIVI really is a lot smaller. I'd have to agree, Mr. Bailey, I do like the all-round use of the Banter, but I think what we're comparing is completely different style knives. I think in its own right, the KI-VIVI is still a very nice knife. If this was in a complete vacuum, then yes, the KI-VIVI is great. If the Baby Banter was in a complete vacuum by itself without the KI-VIVI, again, it would be a great knife, and they both still are great knives. I just think that there's too much difference between them really for them to be compared. I think the better comparison would be something like the difference with the Elementum, which is an absolutely awesome knife. But again, I think there's enough of a difference between the two that the Banter can be seen as a completely different knife, which obviously, it is a completely different knife to the Elementum. But enough of a difference, especially with the size and the weight and that sort of stuff. Yeah, they both can be great knives within their own right. Now, I get it. I really do. I can see why people like the original Banter, which I haven't yet tried, so maybe that's the next step. I need to get the original Banter, but I get why this is becoming a very popular knife at the moment. There's a lot of people talking about the Baby Banter. Now, comparing the two, which was that original gauntlet that was thrown down, the KI-VIVI against the Banter, Baby Banter, really, we're comparing apples and oranges. In fact, we're comparing apples and potted plants. So there's a potted plant in the window there. They're just two completely different knives. They're both still knives, and I get that. So there are some things that you can compare between the two of them, but they are completely different. I do agree, and wholeheartedly agree actually, that the Baby Banter is probably the better all-round knife of the two. It fits into your hand better, the ergonomics are slightly better. It's just a larger knife, even though it's not a particularly large knife, it's a larger knife that it's just easier to do things with. However, you're going to struggle being able to carry this in public, so that's one of the downsides of the fact that this is a locking knife. I still do agree that the KI-VIVI is just a fun little knife, mainly because of its size and just the usability. You can drop it in your pocket, it vanishes when it's in there. I like the little flick action on there. It cuts great. It's a nice little knife. I'm gonna end with it kind of depends on how you want to use a knife. Probably if you're outside of the UK and locking knives aren't an issue, the Baby Banter really probably is the knife of the two to go for. But I still do think that they're completely different knives. I think the situations that you'd use these in, I mean, for me, it's opening Amazon boxes, but I lost my train of thought on that one. But yes, I do agree, Matt. I doff my cap to the, yes, the Baby Banter is a very good knife, but it's just different to this one. So yeah, so there you go. Now, I mentioned at the beginning of this was sent to me from Prepper Shop UK, so I definitely recommend checking them out. I'll leave some of their links in the description below so that you can pick up one of these for yourself if you're here in the UK. I don't know if they do international shipping, however, check the website. I'm sure that they probably do. Yeah, you should always check that sort of stuff anyway. I'll leave some of my social media links in the description below as well. But for now, stay safe, stay Moorlander, and stay EDC.